45,000 years ago, two kinds of human walked the same frozen earth. One was thick, powerful, built like a wall of muscle and bone, perfectly shaped by hundreds of thousands of years to survive the brutal cold of Ice Age Europe. The other was leaner, lighter, less powerful in almost every physical way. And yet, within a few thousand years, only one of them would still be here. This is the story of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, and the encounter that decided which kind of human would inherit the world. To understand what happened between them, you first have to understand what each of them was. Neanderthals were not the dim-witted brutes they were once imagined to be. They were a different, highly successful species of human, shaped by more than 200,000 years of survival in the harsh landscapes of Ice Age Europe and Western Asia. Their bodies were built for that cold, short and stocky, with wide barrel-shaped chests, thick bones and powerful, dense muscle. A Neanderthal's grip could crush what a modern human's never could. Their forearms alone carried nearly the strength of a sapien's entire upper body. In a straight test of raw physical power, a Neanderthal would win almost every time. Their skulls, too, told a story of raw capability. Neanderthal brains were, on average, slightly larger than those of Homo sapiens. But size was never the deciding factor. Much of that extra volume was devoted to processing a bigger body and sharper senses. Enormous eyes suited to the dim light of northern winters, and a brain wired heavily toward vision and physical reaction. They were exceptional hunters, ambushing large Ice Age animals at close range with heavy thrusting spears, relying on strength and courage rather than distance and planning. Homo sapiens, by contrast, evolved under different pressures entirely. Born in the warmer landscapes of Africa, sapiens' bodies were slimmer, lighter, built for endurance rather than brute force. A sapiens hunter could not out-wrestle a Neanderthal, and could not match his raw, crushing strength. But what sapiens lacked in muscle, they made up for in something far less visible and far more dangerous: the structure of their minds. Homo sapiens' brains, while sometimes slightly smaller in total volume, were organized differently, with a much larger portion devoted to complex social thinking, symbolic reasoning, and long-term planning. This was a mind built not just to react to the world, but to imagine it differently, to picture a hunt that hadn't happened yet, to coordinate with dozens of others toward a single shared goal, to pass down not just physical skill, but abstract knowledge, myth, and language, complex enough to plan across seasons instead of just days. This difference would prove to matter more than any single encounter ever could. But to understand how, imagine one such encounter, not a myth, but the kind of moment that likely played out again and again across the frozen borderlands of Europe, wherever these two kinds of human crossed paths. A small group of Homo sapiens, migrating north in search of new hunting ground, moves cautiously along a river valley as dusk begins to fall. They carry lightweight throwing spears tipped with sharpened stone, weapons designed to strike from a distance, not to grapple at close range. Ahead, hidden in the tree line, a Neanderthal hunting party has already spotted them. Larger, stronger, and far more comfortable in this cold terrain, the Neanderthals could win almost any physical confrontation that came down to raw strength alone. But the Sapiens group does not close the distance. Instead, they spread out, silently, communicating through subtle hand signals refined over generations. Signals that let them coordinate their movement without a single word spoken aloud. One small group moves to higher ground. Another circles wide along the riverbank. It is not a retreat. It is a plan, executed by minds capable of holding a shared strategy across multiple people, multiple positions, and multiple moving parts at once. When the Neanderthal hunters finally move to intercept what they assume is an easy, isolated group, they find themselves surrounded from three directions at once. Sapiens hunters throwing their spears from a distance no Neanderthal weapon was built to answer. It is not strength against strength. It is coordination against isolation, distance against proximity, foresight against instinct. The Neanderthals retreat, unwilling to risk injury against an enemy they cannot close the distance on. No one died that evening. No great battle was fought. But the outcome of that quiet standoff represents, in miniature, the outcome of the much longer struggle between these two species. Over thousands of years, encounter after encounter, advantage after advantage, it was rarely the strongest individual that survived. It was the group that could plan further ahead, cooperate more effectively, and adapt faster to a changing world. This
The
pattern
hunter-gatherers,
repeated
the
itself
fire
far beyond
burns.
the
These are
battlefield.
the shapes we need
Homo
to make.
sapiens groups were
Keep the
larger
flame
and more
alive. It is
interconnected,
our heart.
Many
trading
sunrises
resources and
sunsets,
ideas across vast
strong
distances,
hide.
building
Trade is
social
good.
networks that stretched across entire
We
regions.
walk with the spirits.
Neanderthal groups, by comparison, tended to be smaller and more isolated, limiting how quickly new tools, techniques, or knowledge could spread. When the climate shifted rapidly, as it often did during this period, sapiens groups could draw on a far wider pool of shared innovation to adapt. Neanderthal groups, more physically capable but more isolated, often could not. Even sapiens' apparent weaknesses became strengths in disguise. Because they could not simply overpower prey or environment through strength alone, sapiens were forced to innovate constantly, inventing more effective throwing weapons, sewn clothing that trapped heat far more efficiently than draped hides, and complex traps that let a small group take down animals many times their size without ever
Patient.
entering close, dangerous
Now.
range. Every environmental challenge that Neanderthal strength could shoulder through directly, sapiens' intelligence found a way around. This is not to say Neanderthals were simple or lesser. They survived in brutal conditions for far longer than Homo sapiens have existed as a species. They cared for their sick and injured. They buried their dead with what appears to be genuine ritual and grief. In many measures of raw physical capability, they were, without question, the stronger species. And for tens of thousands of years, when sapiens first began moving into Neanderthal territory, this superior strength allowed Neanderthals to hold their ground. But strength alone was never enough to withstand a species that could outthink, outplan, and outcooperate them at nearly every turn. Slowly, over thousands of years, sapiens groups expanded into more and more Neanderthal territory. Not always through conflict, evidence shows the two species interbred at points where their paths crossed, leaving traces of Neanderthal DNA that still exist in many humans today. But even where they mixed, it was sapiens' way of living, thinking, and organizing that ultimately dominated the landscape. By roughly 40,000 years ago, the last Neanderthal populations had vanished, isolated into shrinking pockets of territory as sapiens groups expanded around and past them. It was not a single war, and not a single decisive battle. It was thousands of small encounters, like the one in that river valley, moments where raw strength met superior strategy, and strategy again and again found a way to win. So who was stronger? In muscle, in raw physical power, in sheer ability to survive an Ice Age winter through the body alone? Neanderthals almost certainly were. But strength was never the only currency evolution rewards. Homo sapiens carried something rarer, and ultimately more decisive: the ability to imagine a plan before it happened, to share that plan across dozens of minds at once, and to adapt faster than the world could change around them. In the end, it wasn't the strongest human species that inherited the Earth. It was the one that learned to think and survive together.